Today, we are talking about Theo Johnson, rookie tight end for the New York Football Giants. As always, like and subscribe to the channel. We put out content all year long. And if you guys are familiar with my channel, you know I've made a ton of these videos, kind of these rookie profile videos, deep dynasty stash videos, looking into the raw numbers, the film, the analytical numbers, just trying to find some of the hidden gems in this draft class for our dynasty rosters, specifically rookies. And today we're talking about Theo Johnson. I don't quite classify Theo Johnson as a deep dynasty stash because from what I've seen in most of my drafts, he's being drafted. For sure in tight end premium drafts, he's being drafted. But even in non-tight end premium drafts, I've seen him drafted quite a bit. Now, if he's out there on your waiver wire, you play in a shallower league, you play in a non-tight end premium, he's a guy that I'm potentially going to be targeting to stash. And he could give you production year one. There's definitely a path. We'll get into that. But Theo Johnson, as you see here from the numbers, 6'6", 264. So he's definitely in the mold of that more traditional tight end. The bigger tight ends. We have kind of the new age tight ends who are closer to like 240, more receiving than, obviously they still block, but a little bit more on the receiving focus rather than the blocking focus. Theo Johnson, kind of a player that's a little bit more of the traditional bigger tight end and, definitely could be a good run blocker in the NFL. You see his stats from last year: 34 catches, 341 yards, 7 touchdowns. The touchdowns are really nice. Obviously, the lack of catches and yards is not as nice. Now, we'll get into maybe why that is, but we'll save that for a little bit later. Again, he was drafted in the 4th round for the Giants, and unlike other positions, generally 4th round, 5th round, and 4th round and later is kind of the death note for players, for quarterbacks, receivers, and running backs. Very, very low chance of hitting when you're drafted 4th round or later, day 3 essentially. Or is that, day 3 essentially. Tight ends are a little bit different. Tight ends, the threshold is actually the 5th round. At worst, you want to see, obviously we want to see 1st round picks, but at worst, we want to see a 5th round pick. So even 4th or 5th round draft capital for a tight end is pretty good production because they're just so hard to scout and judge because teams are using them as blockers. And maybe a team used them mostly as a blocker because that's what they needed on their offense. And they didn't kind of utilize their receiving threat. You see the combine numbers here. Now, this is what's very interesting with Theo Johnson is the combine stuff, the athletic stuff. 4.57 40-yard dash is really damn good for a tight end, for a 264-pound tight end. Just to give you a little bit of reference, that's in the 91st percentile. And I guarantee you a lot of tight ends that are in this 90th percentile are a lot lighter than Theo Johnson. So him running a 4.57, having a 10-yard split of 1.55. That's how fast you are within the first 10 yards. That beats a lot of receivers in this draft class. That's also in the 91st percentile for tight ends. He has this build of like a Luke Musgrave, Jimmy Graham, Tucker Kraft type of build, even like a Gronk, just like big and fast, big and fast guys. So his vertical is one of the combine drills that does translate to tight end success. One of the most, besides, size and 40-yard and 10-yard is the vertical. It shows explosiveness, and that is 39.5, right? 39.5 inches. That's in the 96th percentile. His broad jump in the 93rd percentile. His hand size in the 98th percentile. His height in the 92nd. So he's big, fast, and explosive. And these are the guys that I want to be targeting. These guys that are later in the draft who are kind of considered dart throws, especially at the tight end position. We see a lot of athletic tight ends that don't translate. However, if I'm going to choose a tight end that is drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, I'm going to want the athletic ones. From some of his production numbers. Now, the production just is not there, considering how athletic and kind of a physical freak this guy is. The numbers just aren't kind of there in terms of production. His career dominator, 12%. That's what percentage of his team's passing offense did he account for. This is over three. He spent 4 years at Penn State. His first year was 2020, didn't really do much, only had 4 catches. So this is calculating for the last 3 numbers, 2021, 2, and 3. He accounted for 12% of Penn State's offense. He did have a single season high of 17%, which was last year, 2023, which is good to see. We want to see tight ends 15% or higher, right? That's kind of the breakout age for tight ends. For receivers, it's 20%. For running backs, it's 50, for running backs and tight ends, it's 15%. Breakout age of 21, PFF grade of 72.9. Now you see some of the analytical numbers here. Yards per route run is not very good. Yards per route run at only 1.22. He just was not getting targeted for whatever reason. Again, get into that a little bit later. ADOT at 9.1 is a solid ADOT for a tight end. His drop percentage at only 7.3% is really good. His yak is pretty good at 5 yards after catch per reception. Now you expect this to be a little bit higher for tight ends in general, just because they're shorter targets, middle of the field. That's kind of what they're expected to do. Contested catch percentage is amazing, 66.7%. That's what you want to see for tight ends because, again, you're playing the middle of the field. You need to make those catches in traffic, and he was doing that at over 60. Anything over 50% is really good. Over 66% is awesome. And then contested target percentage. Again, if you watch these videos before, you know what this number means to me. If this is your first time, what this is a number that I'm putting a little bit more stock to. I'm looking a little bit more into. It's the percentage of your targets that were contested. And why I think this number, the lower it is, the better. And anything under 15% for a receiver is kind of like antenna up, is because I think this translates a little bit into your route running ability, your ability to get open. Your ability to get open either by speed, by route running, finding the holes in the zone, your intelligence as a receiver. So this number is below 15%. It's like, wow, why are you getting open so often? And, over the course of an entire career, college career, if you look at it from game to game, yeah, it could be, well, he got 7 targets behind the line of scrimmage. That's why his number is so low. If you look at it over the course of an entire career, I think it lends to or points to this receiver is probably either A, really, really fast, or B, a really, really good route runner. And for tight ends, I expect this number, to be even higher. I expect, anything between 20 or below 25%, I think is good for a tight end, just because I don't know exactly the historical numbers. I haven't looked into it in past tight ends, but I would assume that tight ends are having more contested targets, right? That's not the case for Theo Johnson. 9%, like that's elite for a wide receiver, let alone a tight end. So that's really, really intriguing. Now, I do have a little bit of a theory as to why that maybe is, because he was kind of used, especially the 2022 season, where he, 20 targets or 20 receptions, which was over 25% of his reception total in his career. He was kind of used as like a down the field tight end. 16.4 yards per reception is really high for a tight end. That's kind of high for a receiver, let alone a tight end. So that could be one of the reasons why he was kind of used as like maybe up the seam down the field tight end, and that could lend to a little bit lower contested target, especially when you consider that the dude's an athletic freak. But intriguing to see that number that low, and you do kind of see it on tape when you watch it. We'll get to the tape in just a second. Yards per route run by scheme. Again, his yards per route run in general is not very good. Just to give you a little bit of reference, out of qualifying tight ends, the 1.22 yards per route run was 64th last year in the entire nation. So not great. You look at guys like Brock Bowers, 2.65, Eric All, 2.62, Cade Stover, 2.04, Ben Sinnott, 2.02. So, guys that we know their names above 2. And you want to see tight ends at like 1.5 or higher. And to be at 1.22 is not great. He was a little bit better in zone than man, which is good. Obviously for a tight end, especially in the NFL, is more of a zone coverage. They play zone coverage 60, 70% of the time. We want to see you better in zone. Kind of used mostly as an inline tight end, did have over 200 out wide or in the slot and almost 50 in the backfield. So you see his versatility a little bit. as a kind of a lead blocker, which could be good for his future success, get him on the field. Overall, from what I saw from Theo Johnson, is the athleticism jumps off the screen when you're watching the film, right? He's super athletic. He's a very good separator in terms of physicality, if not just his physicality being bigger than most people, but also his speed. He does kind of find the holes in zones at time, which does lend to, much better in zone than man coverage. Really, really good blocking ability, very good blocking ability, and a willing blocker, which again is going to get him on the field. If you can block and catch, like, that's what we want to see, right? Because that's going to get you on the field. He can be a good red zone guy. You see the 7 touchdowns, which, for Penn State last year, 7 touchdowns was, I think, about 25%, just under 25% of their touchdown total. Good after the catch ability. Now, I do think his route running is a bit inconsistent. It's a bit limited. So, he's good kind of up the seam type of tight end, but his other route running ability is not quite there yet. He does have really good initial burst, and just want to see him be, he's a willing and solid blocker, very good blocker. I want to see him take it to the next level for that to translate to the NFL. Overall, I think he can be kind of that traditional inline multi-role tight end. He's going to play 80% of the snaps in line, but he can line up in the slot out wide. He can receive from the inline position. Now, in terms of what I read and what I've heard from Penn State fans, because it's always good to talk to or get the information from the people that are watching these players day in and day out. Is from Penn State fans, they basically said, why didn't we use this guy more? Why was this guy not utilized more in the passing game, right? Why was he, why was he only getting 30, 35 receptions in a season? We should have been using this guy so much more, especially considering it's not like they had this elite wide receiver at Penn State. Their leading receiver was 673 yards last year. And so people are saying, like, we should have used this guy so much more, and it would have helped our passing offense so much more. And for whatever reason, we just didn't. We just didn't use him. And you kind of look at it. He did have a stretch in 2023. The last 6 games, he scored 5 touchdowns. In 5 of 6 games, he scored a touchdown. And it's like, man, where was this? Why weren't we doing this all year long? Right? Why weren't we doing this all year long? And so, you do have to take those things into consideration of, like, sometimes it's out of their control. A lot of times you say, well, a player should earn targets, should earn production. A lot of times it's just out of their control. Penn State didn't necessarily have a great passing offense with Theo Johnson. You just look at the 2021 season. Sean Clifford was there, solid quarterback, but it wasn't this amazing production. 2022 was another year of Sean Clifford and Drew Allar. And again, just over 3,000 yards, I think, passing and like 25, 28 touchdowns or so. And then last year, Drew Allar, who a lot of people do like going into this year, but was kind of his first year as a starter, just a little bit inconsistent, in my opinion. Only 2,600 yards passing, 25 touchdowns is really good. We wanted to see a little bit more consistency from him. So I think there's a lot of potential for Theo Johnson, a lot. Obviously, again, like I told you, if I'm going to take one of these dart throw tight ends, I'm going to take the athletic freak guys. And not only is he an athletic freak at the tight end position, he has opportunity there. Darren Waller retired, right? Darren Waller retired. Giants used a 4th-round pick on this guy. You have Daniel Bellinger and then Theo Johnson. Like, Daniel Bellinger isn't this amazing tight end that's going to hold Theo Johnson off the field. Now, it is tough for tight ends year one because they do have to block. And I think Theo Johnson's going to be asked, or the tight end one for the Giants is going to be asked to block a lot, right? A lot. But, the fact is, like, Daniel Bellinger isn't this amazing elite athlete that they need, or that they're getting. Now, will Daniel Bellinger be on the field? Of course. He was also a 4th-round pick. But if Theo Johnson is just better year one, they're going to put him on the field. So he's kind of one of the few tight ends, these dart throw tight ends late in this draft that are going to have potential year one production. Besides, Brock Bowers, you don't really there's a lot of guys, Ben Sinnott maybe, but he's behind Zach Ertz. Jatavian Sanders, we'll see. A lot of people are skeptical about him. So you look at these guys, fourth round or later. I think Theo Johnson is the guy that stands out the most to me. That I want to target and get on my team. So there you have it. I did have a viewer ask for this video. I don't consider Theo Johnson a deep dynasty stash because I think he is already rostered on a lot of teams. But if he's not, maybe go out there and get him. Maybe a buy low target as the season progresses and tight ends start slow. Thank you to the viewer that asked this. If you guys have anyone in particular that you want me to do this video on, let me know in the comments and I'll try and do it. Do have a couple more tight ends coming up, so appreciate the support and catch you guys all in the next video.